Today's episode is brought to you by Beam. Transform your sleep with Beam's Dream. It's the secret, as you know, behind 15 million nights of improved sleep. You fall asleep faster, you're going to stay asleep longer, and you wake up refreshed. And all of those things contribute to your physical and mental health. Get up to 40% off at shopbeam.com/PDB and use code PDB. It's Thursday, the 2nd of May. Welcome to the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. Let's get briefed. First, amid the ongoing anti-Israel demonstrations nationwide, officials are now warning of the potential threat of radicalization among the pro-Palestinian protesters. Also, Kremlin sympathizers in the nation of Georgia are pushing for a legal overhaul that critics say is reminiscent of the tactics of the Putin regime, sparking a wave of violent riots in the capital city of Tbilisi. But first, our afternoon spotlight. Law enforcement and leaders in New York City are sounding the alarm about radicalization infiltrating the city amid the ongoing anti-Israel protests currently sweeping the country's campuses. Rebecca Weiner, the NYPD's Deputy Commissioner of Intelligence and Counterterrorism, warned on Wednesday that they're observing a disturbing trajectory among young activists in the city and said there was significant, quote, concern around radicalization. That's according to a Newsweek report. Her warning was echoed by New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who said Wednesday that outside agitators were infiltrating the city's schools to sow further discord in the community. Now, initial arrest figures show that more than 40% of those arrested at New York's Columbia University and CUNY Public University were not students. Well, who didn't see that coming? I mean, except for much of the media that refuses to look at that issue, groups with no affiliation to the universities that are fueling this anti-Israel movement. As far as the outside activists and funders of these protests are concerned, the actual students are merely window dressing. They're low-information, useful idiots from their perspective who are used to create the image of a student-led grassroots movement. Look at that. It's just well-meaning kids being kids. Now, in tomorrow's PDB, we'll take a look at the groups behind the funding, the resourcing, the training, and the support of these protests. Now, Adams did not mince words, saying, quote, "There is a movement to radicalize young people, and I'm not going to wait until it's done and all of a sudden acknowledge the existence of it." He said this is a global problem that young people are being influenced by those who are professionals at radicalizing our children, and I'm not going to allow that to happen as the mayor of the city of New York. Mayor Adams has been increasingly fiery in his denunciations of the anti-Israel protests, slamming Columbia and other schools for allowing protesters to take down American flags and replace them with Palestinian ones. He vowed Wednesday evening that the city is, quote, not surrendering our way of life to anyone. He continued, "My uncle died defending this country, and these men and women put their lives on the line, and it's despicable that schools would allow another country's flag to fly in our country. So blame me," he said, "for being proud to be an American," end quote. To the point about radicalization, we're seeing an alarming and growing affinity for Hamas among some of the campus activists, whether they're actual students or they're non-student agitators. Officials at Stanford University sent a photo on Wednesday to the FBI of a protester at an anti-Israel encampment wearing a green headband worn by Hamas terrorists, along with a face covering. In a statement on Wednesday, officials at Stanford said, quote, "We find this deeply disturbing, hopefully, as Hamas is designated a terrorist organization by the United States government. We have not been able to identify the individual, but have forwarded the photo to the FBI." Meanwhile, chaos continues to grip campuses nationwide as the anti-Israel protests play out. Overnight at UCLA, police moved in on a pro-Palestinian encampment, arresting more than 130 protesters. The law enforcement action ended 2 days of turmoil that saw several violent clashes between pro-Palestinian protesters, pro-Israeli counter-protesters, and police. Administrators at UCLA were forced to move all classes online for at least the rest of the week amid the violence. And, well, how about that? President Biden has now also finally weighed in on the anti-Semitic protests on Thursday, saying that while the U.S. upholds the First Amendment rights of all Americans, there is no room for violence. Biden said, quote, "We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent. Neither are we a lawless country. We are a civil society and order must prevail," end quote. He was, as you might expect, at pains to say that not only is there no room for anti-Semitism, but also there's no room for Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian sentiment. Although, to be fair, campuses have not been overtaken by anti-Islam activists. But it's a delicate balancing act for Biden. It's almost painful watching the president walk a very fine line between his progressive base that's sympathetic and supportive of the protesters and, well, everyone else. He knows that November will be a very tight race, and his campaign team, well, they're very aware that if the White House is too supportive of Israel, they could well lose youth and Arab American voters. Coming up after the break, an attempted authoritarian legal overhaul in the nation of Georgia sparked a wave of violent riots in recent days. Look at that. It's protest season everywhere. We'll discuss the pro-Kremlin forces pushing the law and what it means for Georgia's bid to join the European Union. I'll be right back. Welcome back to the Afternoon Bulletin. I want to turn now to the nation of Georgia, where creeping Russian-style authoritarianism has led to several days of violent riots. The streets of the nation's capital, Tbilisi, have been clouded with tear gas as riot police moved against demonstrators for a second consecutive night. These protests erupted in response to a proposed, quote, foreign agent bill, which opponents slam as a dangerous echo of Russian tactics designed to quash dissent. The controversial bill mandates that any organization receiving more than 20% of its funding from foreign sources must register as a foreign agent. And that's a move that critics argue would potentially cripple nonprofit organizations and independent media. Now, this bill was inspired by similar legislation used in Russia since 2012. The law is viewed by many as a tool to marginalize anyone who challenges the ruling elite and Russian President Putin. In fact, these laws have been leveraged in Russia to suppress the media and political opposition. The bill has already passed 2 readings in the Georgian parliament with a vote tally of 83 to 23 in its most recent reading. Now, despite a vow to veto the bill from Georgia's president, the Georgian Dream Party, which has been accused of holding pro-Kremlin sympathies, can override her opposition. Protests have intensified, particularly after clashes on Tuesday night along Rustaveli Avenue. It's a central artery in front of the Georgian parliament. Among those injured was the chairman of the United National Movement, the country's main opposition party. Images of the chairman's bruised face have circulated widely, symbolizing the violent crackdown on protesters. And these events come at a critical time for Georgia, which was granted EU candidate status just last December. With polls showing 80% support among Georgians for EU membership, the proposed legislation poses a threat to the country's European path, potentially isolating it further from Western allies and aligning it more closely with Russian influence. The European Union has issued stark warnings that the bill could derail Georgia's aspirations to join the bloc, a sentiment echoed by the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. In a post to X, von der Leyen said, quote, "The Georgian people want a European future for their country. Georgia is at a crossroads. It should stay the course on the road to Europe," end quote. However, the bill's supporters, including the billionaire founder of the Georgian Dream Party, argue that it's necessary for transparency, and they accuse Western-funded NGOs of attempting to undermine Georgian sovereignty. We'll keep an eye on this story as it develops, as there seems to be shades of pre-2014 Ukraine here. And that, my friends, is the PDB Afternoon Bulletin for Thursday, the 2nd of May. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And remember, there is an ad-free option. If you like your news and analysis without the ads, be sure to check out our premium membership at pdbpremium.com. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back tomorrow. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.